12 years. It is a duration that marks a life, a span of time where hope usually goes to die. For this woman, those 12 years were defined by a single relentless physical reality, a constant draining loss of blood. Every sunrise brought the same ache. Every sunset offered no relief. Her body was a map of weakness, a vessel that refused to hold its own strength. She did not just endure pain, she lived inside it. But the physical toll was only the beginning of the cage. In her world, this condition carried a label that shattered every connection she had. She was marked as unclean. This status acted like an invisible wall, forcing her to step back whenever others drew near. She could not touch, she could not be touched, and she could not participate in the rhythm of her community. She became a ghost in her own village, a shadow moving along the edges of the marketplace. Always watching life from a distance she was forbidden to cross. The isolation was absolute. Her pain was not merely the visible social mark of the outcast. It was a fire burning in the dark, hidden from every eye. While the world saw only the distance she kept, she lived with a private, gnawing decay that no one else could perceive. She had spent every coin she possessed, emptying her home and her future into the hands of healers who promised relief but delivered only disappointment. She stood before physician after physician, offering her last resources for a cure that never came. Each failed remedy left her more fragile than before. The scriptures record the cruelty of her reality. The treatments did not just fail, they actively worsened her condition. Her body grew weaker, her spirit grew thinner, and the weight of her existence became a crushing burden that drained her of every ounce of hope. She was not just sick, she was utterly depleted. Financial ruin mirrored her physical decline, leaving her with nothing left to lose. She was a woman who had reached the absolute end of human effort, standing in the wreckage of a life that had been systematically stripped of its vitality, its security, and its strength, leaving her with only the hollow echo of 12 years of agony. Then, the whispers began to reach her. They were not the usual idle chatter of the marketplace, but accounts of a man from Nazareth. She heard of blind eyes opening to the morning light, of the lame rising to walk, and of sickness fleeing at the sound of his voice. He was a teacher who moved with a power that defied every limit she had ever known. Somewhere deep inside the wreckage of her life, a small, fragile seed began to stir. It was not a grand or confident feeling. It was a trembling, quiet thing, barely strong enough to exist against the weight of her long disappointment. She felt the pull of a terrifying question. Could he really be the end of her 12-year exile? Fear clawed at her, warning her that reaching out would only bring more pain, but the alternative was a slow, silent death. She stopped looking at her empty hands and started looking toward the horizon. Her plan took shape, stripped of all complexity. She did not need a miracle of conversation or a public display of her suffering. She did not need him to stop or even to look her way. Her resolve hardened into a single fierce thought. If I can just touch the edge of his garment, I will be healed. It was a small, desperate act of faith, but it was enough to pull her forward. The day arrived with a roar. She found him at the center of a living, breathing wall of humanity. The crowd was not merely a gathering. It was a chaotic, shifting tide that surged and crashed around the teacher from Nazareth. Voices clamored for his attention. Dust hung thick in the stagnant air, and the sheer volume of movement threatened to swallow anyone. She stood at the edge, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat, but the memory of her 12-year agony pushed her forward. She did not call out. She simply lowered her head and stepped into the press. Bodies bumped against her, shoulders shoved, and the heat of the throng became suffocating. She moved like a ghost, weaving through the gaps. She was invisible, a fragment of suffering lost in a sea of noise, yet her eyes remained locked on the figure moving slowly through the center. She was close now, close enough to see the hem of his garment, but the wall of people stood between her and her only hope. She did not look up. She did not seek his eyes. She only focused on the space just behind him. where the air seemed to vibrate with a different kind of energy. A man shoved past, nearly knocking her off balance, but she caught herself, her fingers grazing the rough fabric of a stranger's sleeve. She ignored the jostle, the noise, and the crushing heat. She lunged forward, her hand outstretched, fingers trembling with a lifetime of exhaustion. She reached through the gap between two men and felt her fingertips brush against the hem of his garment. In that precise, singular heartbeat, the world stopped. A jolt of pure, clean power surged through her. Not like a wave, but like a sudden, absolute silence in the center of a storm. The constant, draining ache that had defined her existence for 12 years simply evaporated. Her body, so long accustomed to weakness, felt a sudden, shocking rush of vitality. The internal tide that had never ceased finally stilled. She pulled her hand back, clutching her own chest, gasping as the reality took hold. The pain was gone. The weight was lifted. She stood there, frozen in the middle of the surging crowd, her breath catching in her throat as she realized the impossible had just become her reality. She turned to vanish back into the sea of bodies, her heart racing with a mix of terror and newfound strength. She had what she came for. She only wanted to disappear. But then, the movement stopped. The entire procession ground to a halt, the momentum of the crowd collapsing like a wave hitting a cliff. Jesus turned. His eyes did not scan the horizon. They searched the throng with a precision that made the air feel thin. Who touched me? The question hung in the air, sharper than the surrounding shouts. His disciples laughed, a sound of genuine bewilderment. Look at the crowd, Master. Everyone is pressing in. Everyone is brushing against you. How can you ask who touched you? But Jesus did not look at them. He kept his gaze fixed, waiting. The woman felt the weight of that silence. She felt the eyes of the crowd shifting, the space around her opening up as people stepped back. Her legs shook, not from weakness, but from the raw, terrifying vulnerability. She spoke until the silence of the crowd was absolute. Every detail of her 12-year struggle, every failed remedy, every night of crushing loneliness poured out into the dust. She braced herself for the rebuke, for the sharp edge of public shame. She had endured for over a decade, but the blow never came. Instead, she felt a shift in the air. Jesus looked down, his expression devoid of anger or impatience. He reached out, not to pull away, but to bridge the final distance between them. Daughter, he said. The word hit her like a physical weight, shattering the years of feeling like an outcast. It was a name that reclaimed her, a title that replaced her history of pain with a new identity. He did not ask her to justify her presence. Your faith has healed you, he continued, his voice steady and clear against the hushed crowd. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. 1. She stood up, her legs no longer shaking. The internal storm was gone, replaced by a profound, quiet stillness. She was known and loved. Her story does not end on that dusty road. It stretches forward, reaching across time to find you. Think of the things you have carried for years, the silent burdens that no one else can see. Perhaps it is a persistent grief, a chronic fear, or a deep disappointment that you have learned to live around. You have become an expert at hiding it, tucking the pain away beneath the surface until you stopped expecting any change. You have learned to navigate your days while carrying a weight that never seems to lighten. But notice this truth. The same Jesus who stopped for her is still moving through the crowd today. He is not distant, and he is not distracted by the noise of the world. He sees the hidden places where you have tucked your hurt. He notices the quiet, trembling prayers you offer when you think no one is listening. You are not just another face in the throng to him. If you are still waiting for the perfect moment to believe, stop waiting. The woman did not wait for the crowd to thin or for her strength to return. She pushed through the noise while she was still weak. She reached out while she was still trembling. She acted while she still harbored fear. That is the definition of faith. It is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward anyway. It is the choice to reach out, even when your hand is shaking. You may feel like your struggle has lasted far too long. You may feel like everyone else is moving forward while you are still carrying the same heavy burden. But Jesus has not forgotten you. You are not lost in the crowd to him. He sees the reaching hand. He sees the desperate prayer. He sees the faith that whispers, Lord, even now, I believe you can help me. He is never too busy for broken people. He notices what others ignore. He stops for those others overlook. He cares deeply about the pain hidden behind quiet faces. If you have been carrying something for years, do not give up. Reach for him. One touch from Jesus can accomplish what years of striving could not. One moment in his presence can shatter what has held you captive. You are not too hidden for him to see, not too broken for him to heal, and not too far gone for him to restore. Even in the middle of the largest crowd, he still stops for one trembling soul. Reach out today.